She was born without a name, before calendars carved time into stone, before stories even had language. The sky was closer then, the stars sharp and low, and the trees still remembered how to whisper. She walked alone beneath their shadowed branches, where no path had ever been carved, where the roots tangled like the veins of the world. She was not called a witch. That word had not yet been spoken. But the birds paused in their flight when she passed. Wolves, restless and hungry, lingered at the edge of her firelight without growling. When her hands brushed the soil, flowers bloomed out of season. When she slept, the wind moved differently. And so, even without names, the world began to notice her. Others came to her, not many, not at first. A mother with a dying child, a hunter whose arrows no longer found their mark, a woman who could not dream. They brought nothing but their need, and she gave them something in return. A poultice made of roots no one else could find. Words spoken in rhythm with the trees. A vision in a bowl of still water. They called it magic, though she only listened, to the bones, to the stars, to the blood in her own wrists. There was no altar, no written spell, no symbol etched in ash. She had no need for these. Her power was in the knowing, not knowledge as men would later define it, but knowing like a stone knows the river. She did not command nature. She remembered how to speak its language. That, more than anything, frightened those who watched from afar. When the sky darkened for days and the rains would not stop, they blamed her. When a child was born with a twisted limb, they whispered about her shadow. Her solitude, once a mystery, became suspicion. They asked questions with torches in their hands, and for the first time, she did not answer. But the earth remembers. Beneath stones now heavy with years, in forests that have forgotten their own names, her story lingers like smoke. Not as a tale of fear, but of a woman who walked first, who listened, who healed, who knew. They said she vanished, but that is not quite true. Fire may have touched the edge of her dwelling, and the wind may have carried cries through the trees, but no one ever found her bones. Some say she turned into a bird and flew beyond the edge of the world. Others whisper that she sank into the roots of the oldest tree, her breath becoming the pulse of the forest itself. But those are stories told by those who never truly understood her. The truth is simpler, and stranger. She moved sideways through the world, into the cracks between things, where the mist gathers at dawn, where the breath catches just before sleep. She became a shadow on the water, a warmth in the cold, the silence before a storm. And though centuries passed, her presence did not fade. In every village, in every forgotten glen, women who listened too closely, who touched the earth with reverence, who dreamed too vividly, they felt her. Some found her voice in their dreams, not as words, but as rhythms, heartbeat, drumbeat, rainfall. A call to remember what had once been known. A reminder that magic was not an invention, but a memory. That power did not come from books or altars, but from breath and blood and the patience to listen. Over time, they gave her names, thousands of names. In some lands, she was called the Night Mother. In others, the Root Walker. To some, she was a demon, to others, a saint. But all of them were only fragments, reflections in a shattered mirror. The truth was older, deeper. She was the first, yes. But more than that, she was the thread that stitched the living world together, the echo beneath every spell ever whispered. Men tried to erase her. They built churches on the sites of her springs. They burned the women who walked like her, who spoke with her eyes. They rewrote her into monsters, temptresses, devourers of children. They taught daughters to be quiet, to fear the dark, to forget the feel of their own skin against the soil. But the roots held her secrets. The wind carried her hum. The moon remembered her name. She became a rhythm beneath history, a heartbeat skipped in fear, a dream passed between midwives, a sudden knowing in the eyes of a girl staring too long at the stars. And still, she waits. Not in anger. Not even in sorrow. But in certainty. Because she knows that every time a woman lights a candle and closes her eyes, she is there. Every time someone chooses silence over shouting, stillness over fury, she is watching. And there are those now, not many, but enough, who have begun to remember. Young women with hands that grow herbs like old friends. Men who weep when they hold the earth. Children who speak to the rain and get answers. She is returning, not as one, but as many. Not as fire, but as water, slow, unstoppable, patient. The first which was never truly alone. She simply walked ahead, clearing the way with bare feet and open eyes. And now, behind her, the forest stirs again. She does not ask for worship. There are no temples raised in her name, no scriptures carved in her honor. Her altar is the patch of moss beneath an ancient tree. Her relics are the bones of animals found with care, the fallen feather, the smooth stone warmed by the sun. Her gospel is written in frost on the morning grass, in the flight of crows at dusk, in the slow curve of the moon's return. You do not need to believe in her to feel her. She does not care for belief. She cares for presence, for those who breathe with the world instead of against it, who sense the tension in the air before lightning strikes, who know that death is not an ending, but a doorway. She touches those who dare to feel deeply, even when the world punishes them for it. The first which was not created by power. She was created by need. The need to heal. The need to know. The need to see clearly when others looked away. She was the one who stayed awake while the village slept, who walked the edges where light and shadow met. She didn't learn magic, she remembered it, like a bird remembers the path south in winter. It was always there, waiting. And now, in quiet places, she walks again. She is the flicker at the edge of a candle's flame, the hush before a hawk dives, the ache in your chest when you feel something is watching, not with malice, but with memory. She is what stands behind your reflection in dark water. Not a ghost. Not a god. Something older. Something that remembers what the world was before we forgot how to listen. The world is louder now. Brighter. Faster. But beneath it, under the concrete and noise, her roots still reach. And when someone plants a garden not for food but for beauty, she smiles. When a child sings to the wind and believes it hears her, she listens. When a soul breaks and begins to rebuild itself with its own hands, piece by trembling piece, she watches. She has no face, and yet you know her. In every dream where you are flying. In every nightmare where you are not alone. In every decision made not with the mind, but with the gut. She is there. Not to lead. Not to save. Only to remind. You are never truly lost. You are simply walking through the same forest she once walked, and the trees still remember her footsteps. There are nights when the veil grows thin, not just in the old stories, not just on days marked by moon cycles or solstices, but in the quiet, personal moments no calendar can name. A breath held too long. A whisper spoken into stillness. A candle flickering though the windows are shut. In those moments, she is closer. Not to frighten. Not to intervene. But to witness. The first which was not made of fire or thunder. She was made of patience. She knew that power was not in the storm, but in the silence afterward. Not in control, but in connection. She understood that everything speaks, the stones, the rivers, the wind through leaves, if only you are willing to listen long enough. And so she did. She listened. And now, so do they, the ones who follow her path without ever knowing her name. They do not dress the same. They do not chant in unison. They are scattered like seeds on the wind, old women with sharp eyes and garden-dirty hands, tattooed poets writing spells into the margins of notebooks, children who stare too long into the fire and smile at something no one else can see. They feel her. They feel themselves. For the world has always tried to bury such knowing. It fears the soft power of those who do not need permission to exist fully. It tells them to be small, to be still, to be quiet. But witches do not vanish. They transform. They become wind. They become memory. They become us. The first witch still walks. Not in flesh, but in rhythm. In instinct. In rebellion. In tenderness. She lingers in those who cannot look away from suffering, who reach out with shaking hands to heal even when they themselves are broken. She lives in every question asked in defiance of silence. In every voice that sings alone in the dark. And so, her story continues. Not in books. Not in legends. But in breath. In heartbeat. In the rustle of the trees when you walk alone and feel, for no reason you can name, safe. She is the pause before the answer. The pull in your chest when you're standing at the edge of something you cannot name. The tear that rises for no reason while staring at the stars. She is not a figure to worship, but a mirror to awaken. You do not follow her footsteps, you find your own, and realize they've been walking beside hers all along. The world has changed, but not in the ways that matter. Cities have grown, machines hum endlessly, the sky is painted with wires and noise. But beneath it all, the soil still breathes. The bones of the earth still pulse. The old language still murmurs at the edges of dreams. And in hidden corners, of forests, of cities, of souls, her presence flickers. They called her the first witch, but she was never first. Nor last. She was simply awake when the others slept. She chose to see when others blinked away the truth. And now, in this age of forgetting, her song returns like a thread of silver in the dark. You may not know the melody, but your bones do. She hums in the silence between thunder. She lingers in the scent of crushed herbs on your fingertips. She stands at the edge of every choice that demands truth over comfort. And when you choose the path that no one else sees, when you speak the words that come not from your mind but your blood, she is there, not as guide, but as witness. As kin. Because the witch was never only one woman. She is the inheritance passed down quietly, through gaze, through gesture, through intuition. She is the force that will not be caged, the knowing that will not be tamed, the wildness beneath the skin that refuses to forget. Not rage, though rage may burn through her, but remembrance. And so the myth continues. But it is no myth. It is memory. It is presence. It is breath. She was, she is, she will be. She walks without footsteps now. You feel her most not in the noise, but in the stillness, in the spaces between things. In the hush after a question no one dared to ask. In the quiet rebellion of planting a seed. In the closing of your eyes, not to escape, but to return. She is not in the thunder. She is the space the thunder leaves behind. And when the world tries to silence those who feel too much, who heal without permission, who see patterns in shadows and hear truths in dreams, it is her voice that rises through them, unshaken. Not loud. Not violent. But certain, like the tide. Like breath. Like the turning of the earth. They tried to burn her, but fire only fed her. They tried to bury her, but soil only carried her deeper. They tried to forget her, but forgetting only made her name older than language. Now she is everywhere. In the crack of ice splitting in spring. In the crow that tilts its head and watches. In the dream that leaves your heart pounding, though no words were spoken. She waits, not to be found, but to be recognized. Because she is not a stranger. She is the part of you that you locked away to survive. The wildness behind your ribs. The memory in your marrow. She is not coming back. She never left. She is in the blood memory of every woman who ever picked herbs by moonlight and didn't explain why. In the silence of men who learned to weep in secret and offer their hands, not their fists. She lives in the gesture of lighting a candle for no practical reason. In the instinct to draw a symbol in the dust. In the breath you hold before stepping into darkness, trusting that something ancient walks beside you. She does not need names, yet names have clung to her like vines through centuries. Hecate. Lilith. Baba Yaga. Morgana. The crone. The maiden. The shadow. But these are only fragments, masks worn for those who need faces. In truth, she is not one story, she is the pulse beneath them all. A rhythm older than writing. A presence deeper than belief. She has been painted as the monster, the temptress, the outcast, the healer, the whore, the mother, the madwoman, the goddess. And in each of these she smiled quietly, knowing that none of them could ever truly contain her. Because she is not what they say, she is what they fear and what they long for in the same breath. In every century, she returned in new forms. A healer burned at the stake for curing with roots instead of prayers. A midwife accused when stillbirth visited the wrong house. A girl who ran into the forest and never came back the same. A widow who lived too long. A child who asked questions no one dared to answer. They called her dangerous. Unnatural. Unholy. And she laughed, not with scorn, but with the deep understanding that the world is always afraid of what it cannot control. Because her power was never about domination. It was not the power to destroy, but to transform. Not to command the earth, but to become it. Her power was knowing that everything is connected, that grief and birth, fire and ash, seed and bloom, shadow and light, all speak to each other, all need each other. And now, in this fractured age, when time spins too fast and silence is scarce, she returns again, not in temples or grand rituals, but in ordinary moments of reclamation. A woman choosing to age without apology. A queer soul choosing to live as truth instead of disguise. A parent teaching their child to listen to the rain. A stranger whispering to the river, just in case it hears. She moves not in crowds, but in convergences. A circle of witches in an apartment rooftop garden. A lone walker barefoot in morning dew. A poet pouring moonlight into ink. A scientist who dreams in symbols. A child who speaks of lives they've never lived. She is in all of them. Not watching. Remembering. Because when you close your eyes and place your hand on the earth, she meets you there, not to teach, but to unlock what was already yours. What was never truly gone, only buried beneath shame, fear, and forgetting. She is not the past. She is the return of what you've always been. She rises in cycles, just as the moon does, not because she was ever defeated, but because we must be ready to see her again. Every generation rediscovers her under different names, in different languages, cloaked in the symbols that speak to the time. In some eras, she is art. In others, rebellion. In some, she is silence that refuses to be broken. And in ours, perhaps, she is beginning to speak again, not in thunder, but in the voices of those who were once taught to whisper. You might find her in the breath of someone standing barefoot in the rain, not as an act of defiance, but of return. In the way a person hums to themselves while gathering stones they feel drawn to, unaware they are performing a ritual older than scripture. You might hear her in the laughter of women around a table, healing each other with stories and unspoken knowing. Or in the refusal of someone to shrink, to apologize for being alive in the fullness of their body, their voice, their truth. She is not waiting for permission. She never was. The first which understood what the world forgot, that power rooted in love is the most dangerous kind, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that awakens. And what awakens cannot be caged. The stories written about her were warnings, yes, but not for her. For the world that tried to suppress her. For the order that trembled when someone remembered how to feel without shame. How to listen to the wind and believe it speaks. How to touch the soil and feel it respond. They feared her because she belonged to herself. Because she answered to nothing but the rhythm of the earth and the turning of the stars. Because she did not ask. She knew. And so they built walls. They wrote laws. They taught fear. They buried her beneath centuries of silence. But seeds know how to wait. And now, in cracks between concrete, in margins of textbooks, in pulses of art and fire and grief, she is blooming again. Not as a single woman in a cloak of black, but as a million sparks in 1,000 lives. She walks with every soul who chooses intuition over instruction. Every heart that dares to feel without permission. Every voice that says, I remember. Because the first which never truly belonged to the past. She was not the beginning. She is the return of the wild within us, not the chaotic or the savage, as they once painted her, but the sacred wild. The knowing that runs beneath the bones, deeper than bloodlines, deeper than memory. She is the wildness that remembers how to kneel before a tree and feel its patience. That knows grief is not a weakness but a bridge. That understands every ending is also a threshold. The first which never held a crown. She held silence, and fire, and grief, and laughter, and life. She wore no jewels, only salt and ash. Her tools were bone and herb, voice and shadow, time and breath. She did not wield magic, she became it. Not in the stories written by frightened men, but in the spaces in between the inhale and the exhale, the heartbeat and the hush. And now, she moves through those who are awakening. Not in secret anymore. Not entirely. You can see her in the woman who grows herbs on her balcony though she lives in a tower of glass. In the boy who dreams of the sea, though he has never seen it. In the old man who lights a candle each night for a wife long gone, whispering thanks to a silence he no longer fears. In the scientist who weeps over a dying coral reef. In the teacher who lets children question the sky. In the artist who paints with charcoal and tears. In the survivor who dances barefoot in a field at night and claims the stars as kin. They do not call themselves witches. They do not need to. But they are hers. And she is theirs. The first which is not a tale told by firelight. She is the firelight, flickering in eyes that dare to look inward, to look backward, to look beyond. She is not fiction. She is not a legend. She is the instinct that stirs when you place your palm on the earth and feel something answer. She is the reason your heart aches when you see the full moon through branches. Why you dream of running through forests with no path. Why a part of you knows, even if no one taught you, which plants to touch and which to leave. Why a storm makes you want to open your arms instead of shut your doors. She is you, when you are unafraid. She is you, when you remember. And she is waiting, not to be found, but to be joined. She waits in the stillness not with impatience, but with the deep, timeless knowing of something that has already endured millennia. She does not rush. She does not chase. She trusts. Because those who are meant to awaken will, when the soil beneath their feet becomes more familiar than the noise in their ears, when the mirror stops reflecting only skin and starts reflecting memory. The first which walks in dreams now, softly, between the folds of sleep. She places symbols in the minds of the restless, raven feather on snow, a flame that doesn't burn, a spiral drawn in ash. She speaks in the language of metaphor, of intuition, of feeling before thought. For her words are not syllables, but sensations, warmth in the chest, pressure in the palms, tears for no visible reason. They are keys. Not to unlock something external, but to unlock you. She is not waiting for the world to believe in her again. Belief is too small a word. What she returns for is remembrance. Because deep down, in the marrow of those who pause to feel, truly feel, her name has never been lost. It is not a name spoken aloud. It is a vibration, a resonance. The way the earth hums beneath your spine when you lay down and surrender. And when you remember her, even for a flicker of a heartbeat, something shifts. You no longer fear the dark as absence, but greet it as womb. You no longer see death as an ending, but as a returning. You no longer worship light without understanding that it needs the shadow to be whole. The first which did not come to conquer. She came to restore. Not the old kingdoms. Not forgotten temples. But the ancient balance. The sacred weave of opposites. The dance of fire and water, blood and breath, decay and bloom. She came to remind the world of the holiness of the ordinary. That to cook with care is a ritual. That to bury a bird with your hands is a prayer. That to cry when the sky cries is a form of divination. She was never about power over others. She was, and is, power with the world. And now, with each soul that turns away from numbness and chooses presence instead, she becomes stronger. Not in the old way. In the real way. Quiet. Rooted. Undeniable. She is not coming back in fire. She is coming back in voice. In every whisper that refuses to stay silent. In every footstep that presses gently but firmly into the earth. In every heart that breaks open and, instead of hardening, begins to glow. And when enough remember, not her name, but her essence, the world will shift again. Not with war. Not with noise. But like a forest blooming at midnight. And when that forest blooms, when the forgotten rhythms of the earth begin to rise again in breath and bone, it will not be loud. It will not be a spectacle. It will feel, at first, like a sigh. Like waking from a long sleep you didn't know you were in. A quiet return to something you thought was lost forever, but which had only gone still, like embers beneath ash. The first which will not be at the center of this blooming. She never wanted thrones. She never wanted to be worshipped. She walked ahead, yes, but only to remind you that you could walk too. That you were always meant to. She does not ask for followers. She asks for witnesses. For those who will open their eyes to beauty and terror without flinching. For those who will walk barefoot on scorched ground and still plant seeds. For those who will love fiercely, even knowing that love means loss, because that is what the world requires to be whole again. She is in the hands that hold the dying and do not turn away. In the voices that speak truth with trembling lips. In the choice to begin again, even after everything has crumbled. She is the wildflower growing through pavement. The crow circling above a city that has forgotten the stars. The breath you take before telling your own story, out loud, for the first time. And when people ask where she went, where the witches went, the answer is this: we were never gone. We were listening. We were watching. We were waiting. Waiting for the world to grow quiet enough to hear the heartbeat of the forest again. Waiting for the fires of cruelty to burn low, so we could rise from the coals, not in anger, but in renewal. And now we are remembering. Not how to cast spells, but how to live as them. Every act of compassion is a spell. Every truth spoken is a summoning. Every moment of awe is a ritual. Every life lived authentically is a circle cast against forgetting. So when you feel her, not in history, not in legend, but in yourself, know this: you are not alone. You never were. And the forest, the stars, the silence, the bones, they've been waiting too. And so it continues, not as a tale told from beginning to end, but as a spiral, ever widening. Because the story of the first witch was never meant to be linear. It moves like the wind, like the tide, like breath, in cycles, in returns, in echoes that grow louder the more we listen. She is no longer just her. She has become 1,000 lives intersecting. A quiet girl tracing symbols in her schoolbook margins, not knowing why. A healer who blends science and instinct, touching the body and soul alike. An elder who has buried too many but still sings to the dawn. A mother who chooses softness in a world that teaches fear. A stranger who weeps at the beauty of moss growing through stone. A soul that says, no, and means it. Each one is a flame. Not the fire that destroys, but the fire that remembers how to warm. The world once tried to teach us to fear the dark. But she teaches otherwise. Because the dark is not evil. The dark is where seeds sleep. Where roots deepen. Where stars are born. The dark is not to be conquered, it is to be met. With open eyes. With reverence. With the understanding that you, too, were shaped in darkness before you ever saw light. And it is there that she first found her power, not by escaping the dark, but by becoming part of it. Not to hide, but to see. Because only in the dark can you recognize what truly glows. And now, as the world teeters, between forgetting and remembering, between fracture and repair, she is rising again through those who carry her spark. Not as myth. Not as echo. As presence. When you speak to the moon, she hears. When you place your bare hands on the soil, she responds. When you forgive yourself, she breathes with you. When you say, enough, she stands behind you. She is the rustle in the trees when no wind blows. The crow that stares too long. The shiver when someone says something true. The strength in your spine when you choose honesty over comfort. She is the guardian of your becoming. Not to lead you, but to remind you that you already know the way. Because you do. You always have. The thread that connects you to her is not a myth. It is your intuition. Your longing. Your ache. Your instinct to protect what is soft, sacred, and unspoken. It is the part of you that has always felt ancient, even when young. The first witch did not die. She dissolved into the story. Into you. And every time you choose to live like the world is holy. Every time you light a candle without knowing why. Every time you sing, or cry, or dance alone. Every time you touch the earth with wonder. She remembers you not as a stranger, but as a part of herself, the part that dared to return. For those who carry her thread do not wear it like a badge. They carry it like a pulse. Quiet. Steady. Hidden, sometimes, beneath layers of survival. But it's there, a hum beneath your ribs, a flicker in the chest when the wind shifts, a tear when something beautiful breaks you open. And the world, for all its noise and forgetting, still answers her. Still holds her shape. The rivers still know how to curve like her hips. The mountains still hold her spine. The lightning still speaks in her tongue. When the trees shudder in the storm, they are not afraid. They remember her. And they wait for us to remember, too. To remember that the sacred was never something outside of us. It was always what we were made from. Her return is not a prophecy. It is not something that will happen. It is happening, in kitchens, in fields, in bedrooms, in city alleys and mountaintop shrines. In whispered stories passed between women like heirlooms. In the unspoken language between kindred souls. In resistance that looks like rest. In softness that refuses to break. In strength that refuses to harden. She never asked to be believed in. She asked to be felt. And once you feel her, you cannot forget. The world feels different. The veil thins. Your footsteps start to echo with something older. You catch yourself moving through the day as if you are not alone, because you aren't. Because you never were. She is the ancestor behind all ancestors. She is the breath behind all prayer. She is the silence at the center of all true knowing. And when you fall apart, because you will, as all living things do, she will be there, not to fix you, but to hold the pieces while you remember how to reassemble them into something even more true. She is not the one who saves. She is the one who reminds you that you were always strong enough to save yourself. And the world will try to distract you. It will try to shout over her. To bury her again beneath machines, screens, fear, and noise. But once you've heard her voice, the voice that sounds like your own, only deeper, you will hear it everywhere. In fire. In flood. In joy. In grief. In stillness. You will not need to ask, is this real? You will know. You already do. Would you like me to continue this story further?